Good morning and welcome to our regularly scheduled meeting of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Elizabeth Glidden. I'm the chair of this committee and I'm joined today by council members Gordon, Reich, Bender, Andrew Johnson, Yang, Quincy, Goodman. And we are a quorum of the committee and able to do business. And we have two discussion items on our agenda for today. The first item is a request for proposals for minimum wage increase evaluations. And so I invite up our presenter. I think, Mr. Frank, are you leading us off here to walk us through the item? Thank you, Mr. Frank.
Yes. Good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I think you know, but I'm David Frank from CPED, and I'm here to request your authorization to issue a request for proposals for a comprehensive economic analysis of a citywide minimum wage increase, and separately, the impacts of a minimum wage increase in Hennepin and Ramsey counties. As you know, the council directed staff in April of this year to develop a recommendation for a study of the effects of establishing a minimum wage regionally and locally, including the scope, the funding, and the development of such a study no later than the third quarter of 2015. And so here we are. Thanks to many of you, council staff, the mayor's office, and my colleagues in CPED who are here, Health Department, Human Resources, Civil Rights, City Attorney's Office, the City Coordinator, Intergovernmental Relations, and Human Resources for their great work in organizing our thinking and bringing this forward. We've been doing a lot of work. Here's what we found out so far about the Minneapolis workforce and our city's place in the region. This PowerPoint is on your screens, and for anyone who's following along later, it will soon be posted online as well. The initial data gives us a baseline from which to suggest the scope of the study that we're here today requesting you to approve. The research supports our long-held belief that low-wage jobs are concentrated in certain industry sectors more than others, most especially food preparation and serving, sales and related occupations, and personal care and related occupations. It's worth noting that we are not the same as many other cities and many other regions. Although Minneapolis has the single greatest number of jobs in the Twin Cities, overall, it represents less than 17% of all jobs across the 7-county metro area. And I would just point out that that is very different from other cities who have studied and some which have implemented the minimum wage or a minimum wage increase. Among major cities considering minimum wage ordinances, Minneapolis has the lowest percentage of its residents working inside city limits. Of all workers that live in Minneapolis, only 24% also work in Minneapolis. And of low-wage workers who live in Minneapolis, 33% work in the city. So again, that's a key distinction. I will show you in just a moment a slide of other cities which have studied or implemented minimum wage increases. And we are unique, as we frequently say. There are some things that we need to know that we don't know today, and which our own data accumulation and research, as extensive and expert as it is and can be, we can't get to without doing a study. That's why we're asking you to approve this RFP today. We can't do and we don't have an economic impact analysis of a change in the minimum wage locally on the city or on the Twin Cities economy, and I will define that as the 7-county region. We don't have and can't do an analysis of the workers in the local economy most impacted by a wage increase, a minimum wage increase, including by industry and occupation, worker demographics, and share of local workforce. We can't do and don't have an analysis of potential job creation or job loss and business retention or business loss for the city and for the region. And we also don't have and can't do an impact analysis on specific industries or occupations in the city. So as a result of those things, we've crafted the RFP scope that's in front of you today. You'll note we're proposing to study two minimum wages, $12 and $15, and 2 geographies, Minneapolis only and Hennepin and Ramsey counties. This is because we're trying to gather useful information for a future policymaker discussion, and we don't believe that studying one wage only would gather enough information to be helpful to that future conversation. Also, we know that there's some policymaker concern about a Minneapolis-only minimum wage increase, so we believe studying a Hennepin and Ramsey County minimum wage increase at the same time will provide useful context. And just so I'm clear, I feel like I should say it out loud, staff is asking for authorization to release an RFP for a study of a minimum wage increase. This isn't about voting to increase the minimum wage. These are some cities which have studied a minimum wage increase recently, and some of the cities which have implemented a minimum wage increase. You can see them on your screen. And just a little bit on the RFP mechanics. We'll be seeking a proposal. We'll select a winner out of a series of proposals. We're asking you for your authorization to put out an RFP on October 8th, which would be due the beginning of December. We'd ask for the study to start in January, be completed first quarter of next year, and we would be back to you with results in the second quarter of next year with the completed study. I thank you, and my colleagues and I are here to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Frank. What questions do people have? Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I just wanted to throw this out there to see whether Mr. Frank or our city attorney can help us with this. With regards to the laws in place, do we as a city have authority to increase the minimum wage?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Yang, I will of course defer to the city attorney on this. I believe that we do, but again, just so I say it a second time, that's not what we're asking for today.
Madam Chair and Councilmember Yang, we have done research on this issue. We have not completed our research on it, so I would have a slightly different answer perhaps than Mr. Frank does at this point. At any rate, we are not yet at the point where we are comfortable issuing an opinion on that question.
And Madam Vice President, I guess the corollary question to that is, at what point will we receive an opinion on this?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Yang, whenever the council wants us to complete and come forward with an opinion, we're happy to do that.
Councilmember, is that Goodman? Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Along the same lines as Councilmember Yang, if there were 7 votes to create a minimum wage in Minneapolis only, we'd be doing it. So I'm just wondering why $175,000 for a study, what is that, like a political out? I'll vote for a study, but I really wouldn't vote for the change itself. I mean, I guess I'd like to ask Ms. Siegel that we have a legal opinion before we spend $175,000 to study something that 7 people don't want to vote for and the mayor right now.
Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe I missed it, but I'm not sure that we've really heard a lot about the background of how we kind of came to this presentation today. And yep. I just wanted to note that there has been a lot of conversations and a lot of collaboration among council members. We had for a while weekly meetings with a group of council members that was myself and Councilmember Fry, Councilmember Gordon's office, Councilmember Warsami, as well as regular meetings as well that included Councilmember Cano and Council President Johnson. The city attorney's office was in those conversations, those bi-weekly meetings, along with health staff, CPED, civil rights, all of the departments that we had included in our resolution, which passed earlier this year unanimously, to commit the city to exploring a study and to bring this forward. That's how we got here today. In all of those meetings, staff presented us with a lot of options, a lot of history about how other cities who've increased their local minimum wages have approached this topic. I think it's fair to say that this is a complex issue and that most cities who've increased local minimum wages have done this type of study. And this RFP, although we considered other approaches, including doing a more open-ended research question, this is really the more typical way that cities have approached this, is by choosing a policy to model and then looking at the projected impacts over time. And then, so that was just a statement about some more of the background. I don't know if Mr. Frank wants to fill in. And then a question for the city attorney was, my understanding is there is no state law that prohibits us from increasing our minimum wage. Is that correct?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Bender, there are no state statutes that expressly prohibit us from adopting this. But again, that is not a full answer to the question of authority.
All right. And I apologize. So we had some people using their little red things and some people on speaker management. So I apologize if I called anyone out of order, but I think now most folks are using the speaker management. I'll just say I'll keep watching. Councilmember Frye.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my understanding is, as Ms. Siegel correctly pointed out, is there is presently no express preemption, but the question remains as to whether there is either field or implied preemption. And I agree that that is an issue that we should take up. But that being said, we are not presently authorizing a contract to be entered with any one business entity. What we are authoring is the RFP to move forward. So in the interim between when the RFP moves forward and when we ultimately contract through the RFP, which as we know takes months at times, we should be able to get an opinion.
Councilmember Connell.
Thank you, Councilmember Glidden. When we decided to pass our sort of working families package, I did a lot of work to engage our colleagues to talk about what it would mean to do a study on minimum wage. And so I think it's important to recognize that as policymakers, we need as much information as possible to respond to the questions that our residents, our voters, our taxpayers are asking us to look at. And so what's before us today is a request for proposals to study an issue that it has national momentum, that has captured the imagination of working families across not only our city and our state, but certainly the United States. And so I think it's very important for us to support this moving forward. And at the time when I had those conversations close to 6 to 8 months ago, a lot of people were interested in studying this issue. A lot of people wanted to keep looking at this conversation and getting the information from a professional source, a neutral source that could really impact, that could really study the impacts of a minimum wage increase in the city and, of course, with our mayor's support regionally. So I think it's important for us to really welcome this information and to look at the implications of this from a holistic perspective.
Councilmember Andrew Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not one of the council members who came out in support of $15 an hour at this point because I just don't have enough information on what the impact's going to be. And I think this study is really helpful from that standpoint. And I completely understand my colleagues wanting a legal opinion before we go ahead and spend money on this. But I think the answer is that it is probably a legal gray area that's not necessarily clear one way or the other. And the other piece is even if we ultimately at the end of the day say we don't think we have the legal authority here, if this study comes out and says, hey, it's going to create jobs in Minneapolis and be a benefit and help lift people out of poverty and into a better place and generate more economic activity, then I could totally see our city getting behind a legislative effort to increase minimum wage at a state level, or to get the permission that we need or authority we need from the state in order to do a citywide minimum wage. So I don't see the fact that we might not have authority, though I think the jury's still out and I am looking forward to an opinion. I don't see that as a deal breaker, essentially something that is makes this effort not worth doing. I think it's a valuable effort. I think it's an important study, and I think it has the potential to help a lot of residents, a third clearly of our residents who are in low-wage jobs. So I support this.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other comment. The Item before us is authorizing issuance of the request for proposal, so I'm going to move approval of this item. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. And that item is approved. Thank you, Mr. Frank and your team. Next, we have a presentation from the coordinator's office with the Human Resources Department. This is the first of what may be multiple presentations on the business plan for our departments. I will just note for my colleagues that traditionally the council has received presentations on department business plans after the beginning of a new term, which is when the business plans are usually updated with a 5-year outlook to reflect the newly approved goals. And this is a receive and file item, so it is for our informational purposes. Ms. Ferguson, thank you so much for being the first.
Someone had to be, and it was me.
I knew you were ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Committee of the Whole.
We might need some, I don't know if anyone out here can assist with the presentation turnover.
Thank you. Yeah, should have been loaded. Diana, did you put this on the Diana? Did you put this on the laptop? Yeah, I am. So I put one if you need me to. Okay. Would you like to proceed ahead or wait on that?
We have printed copies, so if you're comfortable moving forward, I think we can look at your printed copies.
Okay.
And then we'll get this online when it's ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of Committee of the Whole. Our overall business plan is online, and the purpose of this is just to give a high-level overview of the Human Resources Department's business plan. So I will proceed ahead on the page 2. What you have in front of you on this first page is the mission of our department, Working together in a spirit of continuous improvement designed to meet the needs and challenges of a vibrant world-class city, we strive to demonstrate the following qualities, competence, and behaviors in our work. We provide people strategies, being strategic. We provide people strategies in alignment with the city's vision and goals. Talent-driven, we recruit and retain great people to the city and help employees do their best work. Partners, we work hand in hand with leaders by providing innovative, value-added human resource solutions. And ethical and respectful, we create policies and practices and processes designed to promote equity and fairness in employee decisions. The goals of the Human Resource Department, which have been outlined in our overall business plan, fall into three different areas. The first one is the city is supported in creating an engaged and talented workforce that reflects our community and is seen as an employer of choice. The second goal is human resources works seamlessly and strategically with each other and with all city departments. And number three, human resource operations are efficient, effective, results-driven, and focused enterprise-wide. In our business plan, we have strategies and we have tactics and objectives, and all of them fall into these three areas, including outcomes and measures for your review. Going on to the second page, I've highlighted some examples of how we've achieved our goals and objectives for your review. So some examples under the goal of the city is supported in creating an engaged and talented workforce. As you know, we were very instrumental in ensuring that we had a very strong and robust paid parental leave policy, which also included the administration of that policy. We also moved forward an appointed pay plan this year based on feedback from our Minneapolis Employee Engagement Survey. We executed the first ever Star Awards recognition program. And based on City Council direction, we have implemented our first Workforce Planning Advisory Committee. I'd like to take a step back and just give you a few comments regarding some feedback that we received from employees regarding the successful launch of our paid parental leave program. This is based as of July 2nd. 150 employees contacted our Human Resource Leave Coordinator with questions surrounding paid parental leave or to request paid parental leave. As of July, 72 employees applied for paid parental leave, including 27 employees that had at that point not started their leave. The leave has been well received by employees, and one of the comments that we received via email was, "I am so beyond excited at the timing of paid parental leave, and this is a fantastic new leave benefit for employees." So those are some good examples of what we've received specifically from employees regarding the paid parental leave program. Another area is that 75% of our employees who participated in the wellness program, and this is as of today, have earned reduced medical contributions because of their participation in the wellness program. The second goal of HR works seamlessly and strategically with each other and with all city departments. We were a strong partner with both the IT as well as the Public Works Department in the execution of their pathways programs. One is regarding the insourcing program. So of the 10 employees that were hired, 7 were people of color and 4 were women. And in the service worker program in Public Works, 58 of those people who were hired were people of color. The other policy that I neglected to mention was we also implemented the Women's Economic Security Act policy. And in that regard, that collaboration was an enterprise-wide collaboration where we worked with departments to identify places for women who needed to breastfeed during work. That is a good retention strategy in terms of providing places for women where they can go in each and every department. And that was a collaboration between the health department as well as human resources. The third goal, HR operations are efficient, effective, results-driven, and focused enterprise-wide. There's a couple of examples to support that. I'm very happy to report that as of September 1st, we met our goal of go live on the COMET program, which had been going on for 18 months. Why that's important, and an example that supports that is, I mentioned earlier about the paid parental leave program. Well, the COMET program, implementing that program will help us to become more efficient in working with the supervisors in the execution of that and also working with employees. Another example of being efficient, effective, results-driven, and focused enterprise-wide is right now, 90% of our departments are participating in Perform Minneapolis, which is our performance management program. The next one. Under business plan highlights moving forward, under the specific goal of the city is supported in creating an engaged and talented workforce. These tactics that you see below are the areas that we will be focusing on moving forward. Integrate equity into enterprise-wide HR policies, practices, and strategies. Strengthen fair hiring processes by training leaders and managers on selection practices. Educating our leaders regarding trends impacting the current and future workforce. In partnership with leaders, develop targeted recruitment and retention strategies. Develop and execute workforce planning systems, process, and tools. Provide opportunities for employees to become informed healthcare consumers. And last but certainly not least, develop reporting mechanisms to measure outcomes and track results. And that speaks to HR analytics in terms of looking at data that we need to help our leaders and to help everyone make good informed decisions for their as it pertains to their human capital needs. Additional highlights under two other goals. The second goal of human resources work seamlessly and strategically with each other and with all city departments. We will continue to involve departments in human resource strategies that affect their operations. And the third goal of human resource operations are efficient, effective, results-driven, and focused enterprise-wide. We will continue to strengthen systems designed to improve our internal controls, standardize and improve processes, and align with human resource best practices. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Ferguson? I'm not seeing any.
Oh.
This one. Oh, I am sorry. Councilmember Gordon. Oh, I see. Now we've got a couple.
Thanks. Madam Chair. I just wanted to hear a little bit more. I noticed in the plan you identified 5 areas where the administration provides leadership and oversight. And I was very excited to see the 5th area, human resource, racial equity leadership, and where you talk about ensuring integration of racial equity processes into HR programs, policies, and practices. And you mentioned equity also in the PowerPoint here as well. But maybe you could just elaborate on what are some of the ways that you do that. I know we've talked in the past as a council and with you in this very room about decisions about promotions, hiring, staff development, and concerns that we have about the makeup of the workforce. So it'd be fun to hear some of the steps you've taken and are going to be taking in the next in 5 years or whatever to do that.
Sure. In terms of our work, in terms of ensuring equity, one thing that we will be doing, we had to change the timeline on it because of some of the other priorities that have been laid out. But we will be executing an affirmative action plan. And what I've been doing is looking not only within the city of Minneapolis, but looking at other jurisdictions to see what other jurisdictions were doing. What typically happens with an affirmative action plan is it's solely based on numbers. And it's been my experience, I can't necessarily say this at the city, but when it's only based on numbers, it sits on a shelf and no one does anything with it. We have found a tool that I'd like to use that incorporates questions that we go and partner with departments on and ask them specific questions using the utilization rates for the departments, and that would also include utilization rates as it pertains to leadership, and work with the departments to develop the goal and then to develop strategies. That way we can incorporate some of the things that were included in the staff directive in terms of looking at job descriptions and seeing if there are barriers to hiring, looking at what kind of additional training and or education that we need to do to support A good example of that is we still are on track to begin to roll out training around equity to help people with hiring practices and helping them to understand how to minimize their biases in recruiting. Next week, for example, we're starting with our own department. So all of my staff next week will be going through an IBI assessment. And then the next step for my staff is the following month, they will be going through additional training to help them become more culturally competent. The third step along those lines is then they will be trained in even deeper areas to help them work with departments on how to minimize biases. So those are some of the examples. In terms of different types of policies, one of the things that we have always looked at is our existing policies, seeing if there are things that we could be doing differently. One of the key elements of equity is consistency and fairness. And so part of even starting with recruitment and hiring as we are is to really make sure that we're on the same page in terms of what requirements are. And it's my hope that as we get the data, and the comment is going to also help us, we'll be able to produce much more user-friendly data that we can specifically work with departments. And what I'm hoping to do in the first quarter is begin to report back to the committee of the whole what we found so far. So those are just some specific examples of things that we're working on. One other thing that I forgot to mention is that we are in the process of hiring, with our existing resources, a recruiter that is going to really help support departments in targeted recruitment. So we're in the process of interviewing for that position. It's my hope that we will have that position filled within a month or so. So those are just some specific examples.
Well, I like that. It sounds like a lot of work in that area. And you talked about training on implicit bias with the HR staff, and then they can help